What's up, guys? So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, my spoiler review. If you didn't watch my non-spoiler review, that's up on the channel now, as is my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, or just the regular title Guardians of the Galaxy, more preferably. So if you guys want to check those out, you can. But if you did see the film, this video, obviously, as it's titled, there will be spoilers galore. I'm going to be talking about things in this movie in detail. So some of the things that I couldn't really talk about in my non-spoiler review, I wanted to talk about here. And mainly, there was a thing that I said in that review to where I said that the end of the film kind of had remnants of Thor the Dark World for me. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Thor the Dark World. Now, I do think this movie overall had a better ending than that film did. By, like, a lot. But, it did kind of remind me about that, because in Thor the Dark World, where are they, in London or something like that, and they're setting all these big things down, and the ships come in, and people are getting hurt, and buildings are getting destroyed, and we really don't get to see what happens with the buildings or any of the civilians, you know? It's just kind of like, oh, well, all this is over, let's just go and not worry about what happened here. Now, some films that really bothers me a lot, but some films they could get away with it. Not a lot, but if you do it right, you could get away with it. In this movie, I don't think they do it right necessarily, because Ego, he is a living planet. That's what they're calling him, Ego the Living Planet, the one played by Kurt Russell, you know, Peter Quill's father, Star-Lord's father. He is sort of like a living planet, and he was able to turn himself into a human, you know, and to go on Earth and all these other planets to impregnate these women of all these different species, including Peter Quill's his mother. That would be strange if he impregnated another man. His mother, and he put the tumor in her head, and he's the one that ultimately killed her anyway. And he's been doing this, and he's been trying to find the right celestial, or whatever they're calling it. I don't really remember what they called it in the movie, but he was trying to find the one person that he could pretty much rule with, if you think about it, because there's this like skeleton graveyard on his planet, and it's like all the people that he as his spawn, I guess, and none of them really had the right power, and none of them really had it in them, so they all were killed by him, I would assume. That's what I got from that. Now, you might be thinking, Mantis, what is her role in this? Because for a second there, I thought that that's why he had her as well, but she's really only there to kind of put him to sleep, or just be his, like, support system, I guess, and she's there to wait on him, I guess, and just be there for him. But she, like, his handmaiden, kind of, but not like the beings that is his spawn, which Peter Quill is. You know, we're always wanting to know who's his father and all this stuff from the first movie. And his father is actually this planet, so that was nice. And I did like the interaction between the two before things started going really haywire. There was a conversation between Peter Quill and Gamora on how, Peter's like, I saw all these other kids, throwing balls with their fathers, playing catch with their fathers, and I'll never get that, and I never had that, and that's something that I was missing out on. Really great dialogue by James Gunn. This movie, it had like more of a heart to it almost. This is like a more of emotional film for a lot of these characters. There's a lot more emotion to this film, but at the same time, there's a lot more comedy in the film as well, which I think about 75% of the humor worked, when 25% of it didn't. But I love the scene to where Kurt Russell shows Chris Pratt how to create the kind of the ball thing, this like magical orb that they start throwing to each other, and this swelling music plays, and it's like, oh, well, that's nice. Peter Quill finally gets to play catch with his father, something he's always wanted to do. And I thought that James Gunn really handled that beautifully. I think he did a fantastic job. There's things that James Gunn nailed in this movie, especially Yondu as well. I couldn't really get into much about Yondu's character because he is like an outcast in this movie. He's a Ravager. He's like the head of this ship of Ravagers. Like there's a lot of factions, and he is the head of one of them. But like one of the main Ravagers, I guess, played by Sylvester Stallone, he kind of says, your band or whatever the case was, that him and his crew were kind of the outcasts of the Ravagers. So they all turn on him, like they all turn on Yondu, and they throw him in the brig. And Rocket Raccoon, he's with Yondu as well, and so is Groot. You see, the characters, they split off in this movie. I couldn't really talk about it in depth in my non-spoiler review, but when they get to this planet, when they crash land on this planet, because there's this big fight with the Gold people, the Sovereign, I think that's what their name is. Which, before I keep going about that, I just want to say the Sovereign in this movie, they didn't really work for me, but if you think about it, they weren't supposed to be the main villain. Ultimately, Ego is the main villain of the movie, and that's not really revealed until the third act of the film. But that's where people have a problem, because the first two acts there's a small kind of plot, but it's more of a character story and how the characters grow. The plot is dulled down until like the third act of the movie, to where we find out what Ego's been doing, and now we have to stop him. You know what I mean? But the first two acts, and especially even the third act, it is a character story for all of these characters. And I like that. Personally, for me, I did really dig that. Like I said in my review, my non-spoiler review, this is a very different film than the first Guardians of the Galaxy. And with that, the first one had a very nice flow to it, like I said, but in this film, the flow isn't as smooth, because these characters have split off, and we cut back to Ego and Chris Pratt, we cut back to all these other people, and it's a very different kind of pace. And this movie is one of the longest films in the MCU. I think it's the fourth longest. Civil War is the longest, and then the first Avengers, and then the second Avengers, and then this, I think it's like 2 hours and 17 minutes. It's one of the longest films in the MCU, and most of the time, it goes by really quick. I was never sitting there saying, come on, let's get to the next thing. I was always entertained, but I could tell that the film is stronger in some points. Like, they cut back to Drax and Mantis. They kind of have a bond in the film, which is played off for humor mostly. You get Nebula and Gamora, and we get more of them in the film, and we realize what Thanos has done to Nebula and why she kind of hates Gamora. They would, I guess, fight, and every time that Gamora would win, Thanos would like pull a part of her Nebula's body out of her and like replace it with some kind of metal or machinery or something to kind of say, okay, do better next time. Like that's pretty horrible if you think about it. It's pretty terrifying. So you get more with them. Rocket and Yondu are like a team in this film, with like Baby Groot as a sidekick to them, and then Peter Quill and Ego are like a duo of their own. Like this film is like there's duos in the movie, like all these duos, and then at the end of the film, they all come together in this big action sequence, because they do realize Ego is trying to pretty much take over the entire world, and now we have to stop him. That's the thing of the movie now. And I thought it was, like, the story and like what he was doing as a person, I really dug that. Like I said in my review, like I get what he was doing and I like that. But the actual action sequence itself, which a lot of it I did think was really cool, I mean, really, one of the things that I thought was kind of strange, they really had nothing to fight, really. I mean, they were getting shot at by a lot of stuff, but there was if I could remember properly, there's hardly any hand-to-hand combat at the end of the film, in the climax of the film. There was really none, and they're always kind of getting shot at. So Drax has to take Mantis back to the ship because, Mantis has been knocked out. That was a funny moment where she gets knocked out, and then Drax, like, seconds later, he looks at her, she's already unconscious, he goes, look out! Drax is fantastic in this film, and I think he's one of the funniest things about the movie, if not the funniest character of the film. Obviously, I keep wanting to say Baby Drax. Baby Groot, he's played off for humor as well. like in the opening sequence in the movie when there's the rest of the Guardians fighting in the background, and then he's just kind of dancing to the music with the opening credits and everything. I thought that was fantastic, and personally for me, I like the opening credits sequence to this movie more than I do the first movie. I love them both, but if I had to choose, Baby Groot is fantastic in this movie. And when he has to get Yondu's thing off his head, his fin, I believe that's what they call it, because it's got torn off, and there's another one in the drawer, but they're imprisoned. You know, Rocket and Yondu are imprisoned, so they send Groot to get his fin. But he keeps bringing back like things that have nothing to do with the fin, like a desk he brings back. He actually cuts off somebody's toe. I believe it was a toe, maybe it was a finger, but he cuts off somebody's toe, and he brings it back to them, and Yondu and Rocket just kind of look and say, let's pretend that never happened. Like, some of these things are fantastic. And the escape scene to where they escape the prison and they kind of get out, and you know how Yondu finally gets his thing back on his head and he could shoot that kind of thing while he's whistling and he's killing all these people. I thought that was fantastic, and the song that's played in that scene is fantastic, and I think that was one of the best sequences in the film. For me personally, I love that. And Yondu as a character, I think he was really handled wonderfully as well. You know, James Gunn did a great job with him, and he does get killed off in this movie. He does die to pretty much sacrifice himself to save Peter. You know, there's this whole thing where he's like, you know what, Ego might have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy, or something like that. You know, showing that, you know, Yondu and Peter, you know, maybe they did have their back and forth a lot throughout the first movie. They did, you know, have a lot of head-to-head fights, but they did really care about each other in the end, and that really shows. And they have a whole funeral for him at the end of the movie, and I thought that was very nice. But the film, it does kind of end abruptly, you know, with the shot of Rocket just looking out into space as all these other Ravagers come and kind of do this funeral service for Yondu. It was very nice, but it just kind of cuts to black, and it's like Guardians of the Galaxy will return. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the end of the movie. Let's get into the end credit sequences now. You know, which I didn't mind it ending like that. It reminded me a lot of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, actually. You know, after Dumbledore's dead and he's laying there and everyone's raising their wand, and we get that shot of Dumbledore's face and the camera cuts to black. And then it fades back in and we get like 3 more minutes of film. And this, it just cuts to black and we get credits. You know, I think they maybe could have added a little more, like 5 minutes more, like maybe cut out some of the humor that didn't work and add a little more to the end of the film. Just some gripes that I had with it, which makes me, you know, not like it as much as I like the first one. But a lot of these films in the MCU, if you watched my review for the non-spoiler review, you know, I gave my top 15 in the MCU in that video, and a lot of those movies I have at 4.5 out of 5. Like, I love these films. Like, they're handled really well. But this one, like, if you watch that, I have it at 4 out of 5. I absolutely love the movie, but I just think there's things that could have been handled better. Like, when the scene where, at the end of the film, like I was talking about Thor the Dark World before, when, you know, Ego has planted all these things, and all of a sudden when they start to explode, and all these people are running for their lives, and, like, buildings are getting, like, destroyed, we never really go back to that and find out what happened on Earth and all these other places that he's planted these things. You know, like, they're going to have to rebuild themselves. Like, what are the people thinking that's happening? You know, they try to do this whole Sokovia Accords thing in the Civil War, you know, where superheroes have to go in and fix a problem, you know, under government supervision. I'm not saying that some of the Avengers should have came in to save the day, because, honestly, if you think about it, at the end of Civil War, they're all over the place. I mean, no one is really seeing eye to eye yet. I mean, and at the end credits of this film, it doesn't set up for Infinity War. It doesn't. It sets up for the next Guardians of the Galaxy. That's the scene I was talking about. The scene that does set up some Adam Warlock, I believe. I have no idea. I didn't read the comics or anything, but I guess that's who's coming in the next movie as a villain. I would assume, you know, these gold people, these sovereign. She's, you know, the head of them has created this being to be in the next movie, I guess. So we probably are going to be getting more Sovereign in the next film as well. I wouldn't be for sure, but if I was going to put my money on it, I would say we're going to see gold people in the movie too. Probably my favorite line of the entire film is when Yondu and Peter are kind of flying down, And Peter looks at Yondu and he says, "You look like Mary Poppins." And Yondu says, "Is he cool?" Like he thinks Mary Poppins is a he. And Peter, he goes, "Yeah." And then he's coming down, and everybody sees him. Everybody sees the two flying down, and Yondu's just like, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all," or something like that. It was fantastic. I thought that was hilarious. One of the best lines in the entire movie. It was my favorite line in the entire movie. I want to see this movie again. I can't wait to see it again. And that's my spoiler thoughts on it. What do you guys think about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2? Did you see it? It is Sunday now when I am posting this. Guys, like I said, my review for the first Guardians is up. My non-spoiler review for Guardians Volume 2, where I do give my top 15 of the MCU at the end of that video. You guys should check that out. Also, I'm doing a series of Pirates of the Caribbean reviews leading up to Dead Men Tell No Tales, and I just put out my review for Dead Man's Chest. So that's very exciting. You guys should check that out. And guys, you can follow me on Facebook and on Twitter. The links to those are in the description of this video. And you could also follow me on Snapchat at BrianKing72 and on Instagram at KingArises131. Guys, that's about it. Thank you very much for watching my spoiler review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Over and out.